Imagine being a successful doctor, minding your own business, when a flight attendant singles you out and kicks you off the plane just because of the color of your skin. This isn't a scene from a movie, it's a real-life story that shocked millions. Dr. Naim, a respected African-American physician, was about to board a flight when things took a sudden, unsettling turn. A simple misunderstanding, or was something far darker at play? In just 5 minutes, the flight attendant's decision spirals into a chain of events that would ultimately end her career. But how did it all unfold? Why did the flight attendant make such a controversial move, and what happened after Dr. Naim was escorted off the plane? Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking details and the consequences that would change everything for one of the airline industry's most powerful employees. Dr. Naim had always been a calm, composed individual. As a doctor, he was used to high-pressure situations, saving lives, and dealing with difficult patients. But nothing had prepared him for what happened that day. He had boarded the flight, ready to return home after a long week of work. The moment he walked down the aisle, a flight attendant, clearly agitated, stopped him. She insisted that he couldn't sit in his assigned seat due to overbooking. But as he calmly pointed out that the seat was indeed his, things took a strange turn. The flight attendant's tone became hostile, accusing him of being uncooperative. Within minutes, airport security was involved, and Dr. Naim was being escorted off the plane, all while bewildered passengers watched in disbelief. The real question: why had she reacted so harshly? Was this simply a misunderstanding, or was there something more to this? As Dr. Naim stood outside the plane, heart racing, he tried to make sense of what had just happened. He had been nothing but polite, yet the flight attendant seemed determined to escalate the situation. Passengers inside murmured, confused, but none dared to intervene. Some quietly filmed, unsure of what was unfolding. What was it that had triggered such an extreme response? Was there something in his demeanor, his appearance, that had caused the flight attendant to single him out? Meanwhile, inside the terminal, other airline employees were starting to talk. The flight attendant, a woman in her 30s, was visibly shaken. She had called for security and insisted that Dr. Naim be removed, but she wasn't forthcoming with a clear explanation. Was it truly an overbooking issue, or did something else lie beneath the surface? Back at the gate, passengers who had seen the whole exchange began to voice their opinions. Some questioned whether race had played a role in the incident. Others speculated about the flight attendant's personal history. Was she having a bad day, or was there a deeper, more troubling issue at play? As Dr. Naim was escorted away, the airline staff began to huddle together, their whispers growing louder. The consequences of what had just happened were already beginning to unfold, but no one knew yet just how far-reaching those consequences would be. As Dr. Naim was escorted to the terminal, a crowd of curious onlookers gathered, their phones raised, capturing every moment. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. The humiliation of being removed from the flight, in front of strangers, felt surreal. Was he really being treated this way just because of a seat? Or was it something deeper, something more sinister? The more he thought about it, the more confused and angry he became. Inside the plane, the tension was palpable. Passengers who had witnessed the exchange began to speak up, questioning the flight attendant's actions. One man stood up, his voice shaky but firm. "This doesn't make sense. What just happened? Why was he kicked off?" His question hung in the air, but no one had an answer. The flight attendant, now in the galley, was visibly frazzled, her face pale as she spoke to the pilot. Was she second-guessing her decision? Or was she doubling down, trying to justify her actions? In the background, whispers spread like wildfire. A few passengers who had been filming the incident began to post the footage online. Within minutes, social media erupted. Hashtags like #JusticeForDrName and #FlightAttendantControversy began trending. People were demanding answers. How could a well-respected doctor, a black man, be treated this way on a commercial flight? The outrage was growing, and so was the pressure on the airline. Back at the airport, Dr. Name was still trying to get some clarity, but nothing made sense. He had been told there was no seat for him, but no one could explain why he'd been singled out. He reached out to the airline's customer service, but their responses were vague and dismissive. As the minutes ticked by, his frustration turned into something deeper, something he hadn't expected. He wasn't just fighting for a seat on a flight anymore. This felt like something personal, something bigger. And he knew, deep down, that this was far from over. Meanwhile, back at the airline's headquarters, the company's crisis management team was already in full gear. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control, and the flight attendant was in the eye of the storm. The media had already picked up on the incident, and news outlets were starting to run with the story. What had started as a small, isolated incident was now a full-blown PR nightmare. The airline had to act fast, but how would they handle it? The consequences for everyone involved were about to explode in ways no one could have predicted. As the hours passed, the tension only grew. News outlets were now covering the incident in real time, and social media was ablaze with people calling for justice. Dr. Name had become the face of something much larger than just an airline mistake. His story was now a symbol of racial injustice, with millions of eyes on the situation. What had started as a single incident was quickly becoming a full-scale public relations disaster for the airline. But just as the controversy seemed to hit its peak, another shocking twist emerged, one that no one saw coming. It started with a tweet from an anonymous account. The tweet contained, but as the investigation progressed, another bombshell dropped that no one could have predicted. The airline's internal review uncovered something far darker than anyone had anticipated. It wasn't just one flight attendant involved, but a pattern of discriminatory behavior within the company that stretched back years. Hidden reports, ignored complaints, and accounts from other employees painted a chilling picture of a systemic issue that had been overlooked for too long. The flight attendant, it turned out, wasn't a lone rogue figure. She was part of a broader culture of prejudice that had permeated parts of the airline's operations. This revelation shook the public even more than the original incident. It wasn't just about one person's actions anymore. It was about an entire organization failing to address the issue of racial discrimination in a meaningful way. As Dr. Name sat through meeting after meeting with lawyers, executives, and public relations teams, he realized that the story he had become a part of was bigger than his personal humiliation or even the flight attendant's career. It was a turning point for the airline industry, a moment when the public could no longer ignore the systemic issues that had been allowed to fester for so long. Then, just as it seemed like the storm was beginning to settle, a final twist left everyone stunned. The flight attendant, whose name had already been made public, issued her own statement, a video message recorded in her home. In it, she tearfully admitted to her mistakes and apologized to Dr. Name. But her message also contained something unexpected, a confession that she had been pressured by a higher-up in the airline to make the call to remove Dr. Name from the flight. According to her, there had been a directive in place to clear out certain passengers who might cause delays, and Dr. Name, in her eyes, had fit the profile. Her actions, she claimed, were not a personal choice, but a direct result of this policy. The revelation sent shockwaves through the media. It wasn't just about one flight attendant anymore. It was about the higher-ups at the airline who had been complicit in perpetuating these practices. The scandal deepened, and the calls for corporate accountability grew louder. Dr. Name had never wanted any of this. He had only wanted to get home, but now he found himself at the center of a storm that might change the airline industry forever. In the end, the flight attendant's career was over, but so were the careers of several high-ranking executives who were implicated in the cover-up. The airline was forced to overhaul its policies, implement new diversity and inclusion training, and compensate Dr. Name for the emotional and professional toll the incident had taken. As for Dr. Name, he received an outpouring of support, but the scars remained. What started as a shocking personal experience had become a catalyst for change. Yet, Even as the dust settled, a lingering question remained. How many other untold stories were still hidden behind the closed doors of airlines, corporations,